Chapter 34. Margot Verger had a secret. She hated the night. Actually, what she hated was not the darkness, but that in the quiet of the night, she could always see another side of this castle. Even though she had grown up here since she was young. She smelled the unpleasant damp smell of rotten wood from the steel walls, the long, thorny vines crawling out from the sewers suffocated her heart, silently stabbing her flesh. She could hear the gurgling sound of the water, like a group of rats with sharp teeth crawling on the rusty pipes. She could also hear the squirming of maggots and the buzzing of flies by her ears, which was very annoying. Margot didn't like this manner, even though she was a rich young lady here, with a noble status. When she was young, she often crawled onto the windowsill, shaking her legs complacently as she counted the stars. 1, 2, 3. The stars were so beautiful. They hung high in the dark night sky, like transparent, sparkling diamonds sprinkled by God on the black curtain. Each star was shining brightly. With so many stars, would there be one that belonged to her? She had heard her mother say that when people die, they will turn into stars in the sky, so after her grandmother passed away, she would always watch over and protect her mother from the sky. So was her mother also watching her from the sky? Little Margot happily expected, opening her eyes wide to look up at the night sky. The sky was full of stars, the Milky Way reflected in her joyful, expectant, unstained eyes. Then the doorknob moved and someone walked in. Margot turned around and saw her brother. Mason Verger. After that night, the stars never shone in Margot's eyes again. She could no longer see the brilliant Milky Way, nor could she see the dawn and dusk. She could no longer tell day from night. The flower garden outside the window was filled with beautiful, wet red roses. Her tears fell, and she felt that Mason would not drink them all. They would always be there, turning into worm eggs that covered the stems of the red roses. Perhaps because he had succeeded once without being discovered, Mason became more and more daring, more and more crazy and domineering. After verbal threats failed, he turned to physical torture, so Margot would sit alone on the edge of the bed in the quiet of the night. But she did not stay up all night because of the stars, but because of the pain. She never counted the stars again. What her mother said was all lies, to deceive children. And she probably could no longer be considered a child. Later, Mr. Verger discovered the scars on Margot's body. He called Mason to his study, and gently admonished him, so that he gradually reduced the number of times he visited Margot late at night. He began to set traps outside Muskrat Farm. And Mr. Verger came to see Margot again. Her father said, "Keep everything to yourself, don't tell anyone, and protect the reputation of the Verger family." As long as Margot kept it a secret, he would give her an estate where she could live in peace in the future. "You are a girl, don't even think about fighting with your brother," Mr. Verger said, and soon after he made a will, giving his son the right to inherit the property, and if Mason died, Margot would not receive a penny. Actually, she didn't want to fight with Mason for the property. This passed like that. But at night, lying in bed against the wall, she still heard crying. She heard the cries of children on the other side, and she knew what they were suffering. Mason always lured children from orphanages and slums to Muskrat Farm, giving them toys, new clothes, candy and everything that those poor children had never experienced in their lives. The children came here very happily, thinking that they would have happiness and joy, but they did not expect that what they swallowed was sugar-coated poison. They did not know what extremely tragic treatment they would have to endure here, and their parents did not know either. The families in the slums thought they had met kind and wealthy people. They sent their children out to play, sending them away with a complete body but receiving back a broken soul. Just like her. Margot lay on the bed, coldly staring at the white ceiling, silent and indifferent. It had been a long time since she had raised her head to look at the stars, and sometimes she couldn't even taste the hot or cold soup. Her mind was in a panic, thinking that dirty maggots were crawling all over the bread in front of her. She heard Mason's excited voice. He was excitedly throwing a party, opening a bottle of red wine that had been stored for years, raising his glass and swallowing the wine with the tears of the children. She sat on the edge of the bed, turned her head and saw a field of withered roses. Margot knew that she could never go back to the past. Then she went to a new school. On the day of enrollment, she saw a girl as radiant as her bright blonde hair. Margot remembered that she also had long blonde hair, but it was thin and dry due to lack of sleep all year round. That girl chased away the bullies, hugged a weak girl to comfort her, and her slender white fingers wiped away the tears on the girl's face. Margot was surprised to find that her heart, which had been as indifferent as stagnant water, had a ripple. She couldn't help but look at the little girl who often cried with malice. If she were in Mason's manor, she would definitely be his favorite person. She was confused and didn't know what to do, didn't know why she had such vicious thoughts towards an innocent outsider. She was afraid of her own despicable inner self, and even wrapped herself up tightly, not daring to let anyone see her heart that had long been rotten and maggot-like. Later, she became roommates with those two people. The girl who protected others was Siddle. She had long, admirable blonde hair, snow-white skin, and a pair of vivid deep blue eyes. Every time she glanced at her, Margot's heart would beat faster, and she would fearfully avoid her. She always felt that. Siddle could see through her, even the rotten flesh wrapped in expensive clothes. One day, the girl named Siddle announced in the dormitory room, "If you guys are bullied, come find me." She was extremely beautiful, her attitude was indifferent, her long, thin eyelashes raised, her blue eyes gently scanning the girls in the dormitory. Her aura was cold, as if her whole body was emitting a cold air, but even so, she seemed to shine in the dark dormitory. Strangely, at that moment, Margot suddenly heard her heart beating strongly. Her heart was beating fast, not because of cowardice and fear, but because of excitement and unprecedented expectation. For a moment, it seemed like she saw stars in the dark night again. But she never expected that she could also have the courage of a star. Margot still silently observed everything in front of her in the dark corner, just like when she was at Muskrat Farm. It seemed like she had left that place, but it seemed like she had never left. She saw Louise and Siddle become good friends, saw Siddle smile at Louise. She knew that Jacqueline hated Siddle, and so did she, but their hatred was not the same. One day, Siddle saw the unhealed wounds on her body. She saw a flash of surprise in Siddle's eyes. Siddle still talked to her as if nothing had happened, and did not act unusual. Margot suddenly understood that Siddle might not be as arrogant and cold as she appeared to outsiders. She was actually very gentle. All right, she thought. Even if it was not her star, she still hoped that this star could always hang in the night sky and never fall. During the vacation, she returned to Muskrat Farm and met her brother Mason Verger again. He was still the same as before. Margot thought that she could do something, but facing the tall and cold iron wall, she cowardly retreated. Until Mason saw the contact number on the phone, he grabbed the phone in a frenzy of excitement, muttering Siddle's name. Only then did Margot realize that Mason had been eyeing Siddle for years, but how could she let that star fall into the swamp, even if that star didn't belong to her? She would be so sad if that bright star fell into this dirty swamp. Margot wanted to snatch the phone back. Of course Mason could beat his 12-year-old sister, but he was shocked by her madness. Later, Margot's cell phone still fell into Mason's hands, because their father, old Verger, had returned. He couldn't stand his daughter's insults to his son, such as Margot biting off a piece of flesh on Mason's wrist. The drunken man pulled out a leather belt and dragged his daughter into the secret room. In fact, the beating was very painful, but Margot didn't cry. Her tears had dried up when Mason had pressed her down when she was little. She was still thinking about the stars, even though she hadn't seen them for many years. But the stars were really beautiful. They weren't her stars, but in that moment, the starlight shone into her eyes, and she saw a child who had sat by the window many years ago, looking up and counting the stars. She was still so clean, innocent, and untouched by the world. Under the bright light of the Milky Way, it seemed like she had also turned into a star. A shining star. After the housekeeper found Margot, Mason had found a doctor to apply medicine to her. Tell me, why did you provoke that old man? He chuckled by her bed. It's not like you don't know how hot-tempered he is. Wait until Siddle gets here, don't talk nonsense, Mason threatened, because she had always been patient, and he didn't even remember that Margot was a person who could resist. Margot pretended to bow her head in obedience, but still took the opportunity to steal someone else's cell phone to send a message to Siddle. Don't come, run away. Don't come here, this is hell on earth. She thought she might never see Siddle again, even though she really wanted to see her. But the next day, when she went downstairs, she saw the blonde-haired white girl sitting on the sofa looking straight at her. Margot smiled unconsciously, even though she had forgotten how her muscles worked when she smiled, and also forgot the feelings of a person when she smiled. Oh, that star still fell into her heart in the end. Even though she was shy, mean, ugly, and had never taken a step forward, Siddle still became the morning star that led her out of the darkness.